We should remember to plug, say, like and subscribe.
Please like and subscribe.
Welcome to Screens of the Stone Age, the podcast where scientists review movies about prehistoric people. My name is Josh Lindahl. I'm a grad student studying Neanderthal teeth, and I'm here with...
I'm Kim Plomp. I'm a bioarchaeologist. I study human health and disease and evolution.
I'm Russ Barnett, mainly looking at paleogenetics of Ice Age megafauna.
And today we are talking about the movie The Extraordinary Adventures of Adèle Blanc-Sec, which looks like it was based on a comic book. I'd never heard of this. Ross, you suggested this one, right?
Yeah. I only realized much later that it was a comic book. I saw the film about 10 years ago, I think, just on Netflix or Amazon or something. Other streaming services are available. But then my daughter got the graphic novel out of the library, and I was like, oh, the graphic novel looked pretty good. So I didn't know which came first, but I assume, well, I don't know what I assume. One came first, but I don't know which.
I think the graphic novel is from the 70s, and the movie is from 2010.
Okay.
Oh, if I had read that when I was young, she would have been my idol. I mean, she's kind of my idol now.
The other reason we're doing this one is because we watched Ammonite last time, and Kim was very disappointed. So this is supposed to be one with a badass woman archaeologist doing badass archaeology, but she's not really an archaeologist. She's actually a journalist or a writer or something.
And a grave robber.
Yeah.
But she is badass.
She is badass. We can agree on that. And very, very French.
Yes. And beautiful.
Yeah, that's the other thing. The movie is in French, so I assume we all watched it with subtitles.
Yeah.
Yes.
So who wants to summarize this one?
I think Kim's done the last few. I'm happy to do this one, if that's okay with you, Kim.
Yeah, I watched it in a fever haze a couple days ago, so...
Yeah, well, I mean, so I've seen this film twice now, and I think it's pretty good. But it is, I was saying to Josh earlier, it's very, very French. It's that style of kind of whimsical, kind of Gallic cinema where there's lots of intersections and randomness and coincidences and extraneous detail, which doesn't really mean anything, but appeals to a kind of French audience, I guess. It's Luc Besson that's the director, so that kind of the guy that did The Fifth Element. But it reminds me mostly of Amélie. It's that same kind of mix of whimsy and drama. Anyway, so it's set in Paris in the kind of 1910s, and it sort of starts off with an introduction to a random character who's walking through the streets of Paris, whose name I've instantly forgotten, and it doesn't really matter. He's just a kind of fat guy who's drunk on his way home. And at the same time as this guy's walking home, and we're learning all about the details of his walk, we cut to the Muséum National d'Histoire Naturelle, the kind of Paris Natural History Museum, which has a very famous and very beautiful kind of gallery of comparative anatomy or comparative vertebrate paleontology, which hasn't really changed in the past, I guess, century and a half at least. So I visited in 2010, and it looks exactly like a kind of Victorian gallery, just lots of skeletons on display, minimal signage, beautiful kind of wooden floors and ornate cast iron work. And anyway, so the scene zooms in on a case which has what's clearly an elephant bird egg. So this enormous Apiornis egg, of which there are many, and there are some in the actual museum. But unlike the one in the actual museum, the one in the film starts to crack open. So this is a huge kind of bigger than rugby ball sized egg, cracks open inside its case, and out comes a baby pterosaur, which is not what you expect. And the pterosaur kind of gets out of the egg, cracks through the case, and flies out of the museum, kind of breaks through the glass of the roof and escapes. And it escapes and it attacks a person who's the ex-mayor of Paris, who's having a dalliance with a can-can dancer. As I said, this is a very French film. In this kind of carriage as it's going over the Seine, and the pterosaur attacks the car, is witnessed by the drunk man who's been walking home, who can't believe his eyes, and it kind of knocks the car into the river with disastrous effects. We also see at the same time that somehow this reanimated pterosaur that's just been hatched is under the control of an old man who is called Professor Bourguignon. I can't quite get the pronunciation right, but he somehow has mastered, through his esoteric theories and hypothesis, how to bring dead things back to life. And then it kind of, after this sort of 10-minute prologue of the kind of hatching pterosaur, we meet one of the important characters in the film, who is Andrei Zoborowski, who we first meet his meeting with Adèle Blanc-Sec, who is the title character of the film. He goes to a kind of book signing of Adèle Blanc-Sec about her expeditions in the Himalayas, finding the Yeti, and he instantly falls in love with her when she signs the book for him, and is obsessed from that moment on. And then it cuts very quickly away from meeting all these kind of characters, and we kind of focus in on Adèle Blanc-Sec, who now, in the present day, at the same time as the pterosaur is on the loose in Paris, is in an archaeological dig in Egypt on a camel, trying to find the tomb of some ancient Egyptian, which involves secret... Patmosis, yes. And they need secret doors and treasure maps. There's kind of hired laborers who double cross her. They get to the tomb, which she's been looking for. She was supposed to have gone to Peru to climb Machu Picchu. That was where her publisher wanted her to go. But instead, she's taken the money and she's gone to Egypt to find Patmosis's tomb. They get there. They find the treasure room, but she's not interested in treasure. She's only interested in finding the tomb of Patmosis. We'll get onto this more a bit later, but it's very Indiana Jones kind of tomb raiding. There's not a lot of archaeology going on at all. It's just about the gold and the silver for most of them, apart from Adèle Blanc-Sec, who's looking for Patmosis. But she finds the sarcophagus and gets the mummy, despite being double-crossed and almost killed by the hired help that she's got. And we discover that Patmosis was the mummy was the doctor to one of the famous pharaohs and was renowned for his healing abilities, which is important later on. Okay, so with all of this sort of setup, and there's an awful lot of setup, we kind of finally get a bit of backstory of why Adèle Blanc-Sec is so interested in getting Patmosis, the mummy doctor, back to her house, and how everything is kind of tied together. So we see her kind of come to her home. She takes the mummy out of its kind of case, puts it in her living room, and we see that in a bedroom in Adèle's house, there is her very, very ill sister, who appears to have a hat pin protruding through her head, which looks quite sore. We don't really know what's going on. That's not explained until a bit later. You know, this kind of French film loves dealing out the kind of information that the viewer needs bit by bit. But yes, so that's part of the story. And then at the same time, we have the kind of reanimating professor, the Professor Bourguignon, or whatever his name is, I can't remember. He is being visited by the police because they put Inspector Capone, who is a gourmand, a kind of glutton, but a very good detective. They put him on the case because it's really important that they get to the bottom of why the ex-mayor of Paris ended up drowned in the Seine with a can-can dancer. They have to get to the bottom of this. I mean, this is the sort of thing that typically we imagine that most French people get up to, you know, dalliances with can-can dancers and the like. But the new mayor, or the president, actually, the president wants this issue solved. The only witness to the event was the drunk guy that we meet right at the beginning of the film, who claimed that a pterosaur came down and knocked it into the Seine. Obviously, he is insane. Nobody would believe that. But they kind of investigate this a bit. They go to the museum. They see that there's a hatched egg in the case. They talk to Jabberwocky, the guy that's madly in love with Adèle, who works at the museum, and his boss, who's the kind of museum curator. And they tell him, they tell Capone, the detective, that they need to speak to Brion, who is the man for not Cretaceous, which is what the Jabberwocky's boss is interested in. He's a Cretaceous man, as he says. They need somebody who's interested in the Jurassic, which is the Professor Brion. And so they send him off to find that. Unfortunately, because of this connection, Brion has somehow used his skills to bring the pterosaur back to life. The pterosaur has found its way to his house, and he's hiding the pterosaur behind the curtains of his living room, just as Capone, the detective, and the police turn up to get to the bottom of this. So that leads to a bit of trouble. They kind of come in, invite themselves in for a bit to eat and some tea, while Brion is trying to hide the pterosaur from them unsuccessfully. It kind of escapes at the end when Capone, in his kind of hunger, eats an egg, and it's the egg that kind of triggers the pterosaur to go nuts. Obviously, it doesn't like the idea of somebody else eating an egg, which is what it has just come from. And so, in a stroke, they kind of confirm the idea that there's a pterosaur on the loose in Paris. I think it escapes, but they arrest Professor Brion, and he is going to be instantly sentenced to death because he's responsible for bringing the pterosaur back, which caused the ex-mayor to go into the Seine with his can-can dancing lover. And that's how French justice works. They go straight to execution. He's going to be guillotined. But at the same time as this is happening, Brion is in jail. We kind of cut back to Adèle Blanc-Sec, and we realize that she knows Professor Brion, and in fact, he was a big part of her plan. So what happened to her sister, who is actually her twin sister, is that they were kind of great sibling friends, slight rivals. One day they were playing a very intense game of tennis, and Adèle lost her kind of temper, kind of backhanded the ball back at her sister. It somehow managed to knock her hat pin out and cause her to fall backwards and be impaled through the head on her hat pin. And Adèle feels really responsible for this. No doctors in modern Paris can do anything about it. But she thinks that if she can get Patmos from Egypt, bring him back, get Professor Brion to return him to life, then he will have the skills to cure her twin sister. And Professor Brion, the reason why he had been he brought back the pterosaur from the museum was just to test whether his crackpot theories about resurrecting the dead would actually work. So now we have the kind of mid part of the film where somehow Adèle has to get Professor Brion out of jail, escape from the guillotine, bring him to Patmos the mummy to get him to work, and hope that Patmos will have the skills to bring her sister back to good health. But at the same time, the pterosaur is still on the loose. The authorities have enlisted a big game hunter who's been brought in by Capone to kind of hunt the pterosaur. And so he's kind of a stereotypical kind of pith helmet and safari suit kind of big game hunter searching through the streets of Paris, pretending to be a sheep to try and entice the pterosaur within firing range. Adèle breaks into the prison multiple times, pretending to be different people, pretending to be a policeman, a nun, all sorts of things. Breaks out Brion from the prison, or almost breaks him out a bunch of times, but it never works in the end. So eventually, she kind of gives up and goes directly to the president to ask him for a pardon. But the president, although he also very much likes Adèle Blanc-Sec because she is one of those kind of muses that everyone instantly falls in love with, and she saves him from the pterodactyl attack. Although it kind of snatches his dog away from his garden, he refuses to. I think he refuses to grant a pardon to the professor. But somehow let me just check my notes. They do. So the professor is taken to be guillotined. But he gets rescued. How does he get rescued? My notes are
by Adèle flying a pterodactyl.
Oh, that's right. Yes. So, how could I forget? So Adèle, along with Jabberwocky, who has written her loads of letters and is madly in love with her, and turns up at just the right time to help with her plans. He has been trying to entice the pterosaur to the Jardin des Plantes in Paris with the help of the curator and some good steak, some nice French cheval or something equivalent. And so they succeed, and Adèle makes friends with the pterosaur because she has a feather boa on, and the pterosaur is not feathered. It's not a dinosaur, so it wouldn't have feathers, but it doesn't even have, fluff, pterosaur fluff, which we know the pterosaurs have. But he's very enamored of her feather boa, so she gives it to him, and that's how she becomes friends with the pterosaur. And the pterosaur allows her to ride it, so she rides into a dramatic rescue to get the professor from the guillotine and take him away back to the Jardin des Plantes. But unfortunately, when she arrives back at the Jardin des Plantes, the big game hunter is there, and he's an idiot. So even though there's no danger, he tries to shoot the pterosaur, which he succeeds in doing, but he also shoots the professor quite seriously in the chest, and kind of all sorts of pandemonium kind of kicks off, and the professor's the only one that can bring Patmos, the mummy, back to life. So if he goes, then there's no way they can do that. So Adèle takes the very injured professor back to her house. His strength is failing. He's not doing too good. He's bleeding all over the place. He has a kind of psychic connection to the pterosaur. So if the pterosaur dies, then he's going to die as well. So they have to look after the pterosaur too. That job gets given to Jodorowsky. And so the professor sits in Adèle's house. She's kind of frantic with worry, but he manages to do his magic, which is essentially what it is. He starts it, but then he essentially falls dead to the floor, and they don't know if it's worked or not. But of course, it has worked. Patmos wakes up. He speaks fluent French, which is great. He sort of talks to Adèle and says that actually, the professor's magic was so strong that he's actually resurrected everything within about a 2-mile radius. So that's great. But they also find out that Patmos isn't a doctor. It was they got the wrong mummy. He's actually a nuclear physicist, not a doctor. But because all the mummies are stored within 2 miles of where Adèle Blanc-Sec's apartment is, all they have to do is go to the exhibition at the museum, and they'll be able to find the right doctor and see if he can help. So they head to the museum.
It's because the Ramsey exhibit is there, and the doctor's always buried with Ramsey.
Sorry, what was that again?
It's because the Ramsey's exhibit is at the museum.
Yes, it's at the museum.
The doctor's always buried right beside Ramsey.
Exactly. So they just have to go to the museum, and they'll be able to find the right doctor. Though Patmos is pretty cool. I mean, he has some tricks of his own as a nuclear physicist, not least of which is speaking fluent French. So they kind of walk to the museum. They kind of wheel Adèle's sister along with them as well. So, and they find all the mummies, and they chat to them, and they basically have to tell their story to the pharaoh to get his permission to have his doctor look at her sister. And of course, he feels for Adèle's situation and grants permission for his doctor to take a look. And the doctor is called Nosibis, I think. And they kind of work their Egyptian magic and kind of grind together a few medicines. And essentially, Nosibis just takes the hat pit out of Adèle's sister's head, and that helps her to, with a little bit of the pharaoh's entrails. That's also an important part of the medicine from the canopic jar. They take it to Agatha, who is Adèle's sister, and she's returned to health, and they embrace happily, and everything's good. And then that's essentially kind of the end of the story. The mummies decide to go back to Egypt, which is great.
No. They decided to go check out Paris.
Oh, sorry, yes. But on their way to the Nile.
Right.
And the kind of whole situation with the pterosaurs and the living dead mummies is all put down to an anarchist plot by the president, so that kind of ties that up. And Jodorowsky, Andre, who is madly in love with Adèle Blanc-Sec, he brings her flowers, but when he knocks on her door, it's Agatha, the sister that opens them, and she takes a real like to Andre, and so maybe Adele's not the girl for him, but Agatha could be, and she invites him in. And Adele decides that it's been all too much, all this sort of stuff with mummies and Patmos and Nosibis and her sister and the hat pin and all the rest of it, and she needs a good holiday. And so she decides to get some tickets for a cruise, and she heads down to the dock and gets onto the boat with her suitcases. And as the boat sails off to the horizon, we see that it's actually the RMS Titanic, an adventure for another day. And
Is there a part 2 to this movie?
There should be, but
Yeah.
maybe in the comics there is, because I think that definitely the comic that Naomi got has a different story, one that involves a Yeti.
Ooh.
Hmm.
So the Yeti one, because in the movie, that was the book that the guy wanted her to sign, was her.
Yeah, that was her kind of earlier adventure that's alluded to.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, so much happens in this film. I mean, I barely there's all sorts of subplots that I've not even mentioned. Like there's a bad guy, the equivalent of Belak or Belloc in Raiders of the Lost Ark, a kind of sinister French guy with terrible teeth who wants to thwart Adele, although he also is sort of a bit creepily in love with her as well. And he appears at various points. He appears at the Egyptian tomb, and he appears near the Titanic scene at the end as well.
But I mean, there's a lot that goes on, and usually we say that as a bad thing, but this was a well-made movie, so it wasn't overwhelming. Like, you were able to follow everything.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that very kind of French thing of lots of intersecting plot lines and kind of insane focusing on kind of irrelevant details, like what time things happen, even though it doesn't matter, what day it is, and the kind of minutiae of kind of background characters' lives that kind of pop in and out of the story.
Well, the policeman who never got to eat, he was so hungry and because his meal kept getting interrupted. So throughout the entire movie, he doesn't get to eat.
He's the one that kind of tries to eat the egg and then enrages the pterosaur.
Yeah, and then next he's about to eat a sandwich, and then the pterosaur poops on it and him.
And did you mention the hunter that they hire, the big game hunter who just came back from safari, Justin Saint-Hubert, who is hunting the pterodactyl, but everyone takes him very seriously, but he's very comical and kind of never really has that much to do with the plot in the end.
Apart from shooting the professor.
Yeah.
Apart from shooting the professor, I guess. Yeah, very importantly. But of everything else throughout the episode or throughout the movie, he has them dressing up as sheep to try and lure in the pterodactyl, and they're not getting close at all. And I think it's only a coincidence at the end that he actually finds the pterodactyl.
Yeah, he's comic relief.
That the pterodactyl didn't eat the dog. They were friends. He grabbed the president's dog, but didn't eat him. Yeah.
And the big game hunter ends up being, I think, brutalized by some gorillas in the zoo. That's his kind of fate?
Yes. Yeah.
The classic
That's
kind
the
of slapstick
post-credit scene.
Yeah.
So do we have scientific inaccuracies to discuss in this movie?
I think we do.
So the whole premise behind the professor being able to control these animals is that his hypothesis that the body dies, but the brain, the self, stays dormant in the body for millennia, obviously, because of the pterosaur. And so that's what he has to be able to, if he can wake it up, this dormant brain that's in every dead body.
Using vibrations.
Vibrations.
The most beloved of all kind of flim-flam artist words. Anyone that talks about vibrations that's not a musician is always full of shit.
The thing is with this movie, though, is that it's magic, so you can't really get mad at it. Like, it's a magical. No. I mean, the mummies had magic, right? They could lift things telepathically and stuff. I don't know. That was never explained, but
no,
I think
that's just the
idea that ancient Egyptians were magic, right?
Yeah, but and then it kind of says that Patmos is a nuclear physicist, and that's why he can do kind of magic of physics like telekinesis and things like that. But I've got a few inaccuracies that I want to kind of highlight. So one is that all the way through, it's called a pterodactyl, but pterodactyl is a specific genus of pterosaur. So pterosaur is the kind of family grouping, and this one seems to be some kind of rhamphorhynchoid. So it's like it's not, it's quite big for a pterosaur. It has lots of teeth which point out of its beak at different angles. So it's not the kind of classic pteranodon, which is toothless and has the big kind of crest at the back. It's not a tabajarid, which are also toothless and have enormous crests. It's not Quetzalcoatlus, which is the size of a giraffe kind of thing. It seemed to be a kind of small rhamphorhynchoid. But my understanding as well is that the most recent fossil evidence is that pterosaurs laid sort of small, round, leathery eggs like turtles did. They found some pterosaur nests, and so they actually laid pretty small eggs, not enormous elephant bird size eggs that are kind of bigger than a rugby ball. But that wouldn't have looked so impressive, I guess, in the film.
Are you telling me that pterosaurs were not born fully adult size straight out of the egg?
I am trying to tell you that, Josh. I don't know if you'll believe me or not, but that's what I'm trying to tell you. But yeah, I think that it was quite nicely animated. They gave it a decent amount of character. It had a little bit of fuzz. I quite liked that they said it was at some point that it was 135 million years old, and then they didn't kind of contradict that, because 135 million years ago is the Jurassic, not the Cretaceous. And when they go to the museum and speak to the curator, he very openly says, "Well, I'm a Cretaceous man. You need to speak to somebody who's a Jurassic expert," which just happens to be the reanimating professor guy. So that was nice. But there's not really a lot of, apart from the lovely shots of the kind of the gallery of vertebrate paleontology in the Paris Museum, there's not a lot of kind of fossil stuff in there that I could have.
There's a lot about ancient Egypt, but I really know nothing at all about ancient Egypt.
I think
I do know. Sorry, I was just going to say, I do know they don't speak French there.
Yes. I was just going to say that they didn't say much about the mummification process, so they didn't say anything wrong, because they didn't say, but they did.
Well, they did have an automatic mummifying machine.
I was just going to say that besides the automatic machine, but the actual process of taking out the remains and then using an oil and all that stuff, that was all.
They do talk about the canopic jars, which are the real sort of thing that they would put. I mean, my very, very basic understanding of Egyptian mummification is they take all the kind of insides out and they get their own kind of canopic jars. So the kidneys go in one, the liver goes in another, the heart goes in a different one, and the brain actually comes out. So I mean, this kind of contradicts with the kind of plot line in the story that they can that the professor taps into the vibrations of the brain waves which survive after death. Well, all the mummies' brains are going to be in jars rather than in their bodies, because that's a sort of.
Does he say brain or does he say mind?
Oh, okay, sorry. That's.
Well, I don't know. I don't remember, but mind could be different, right? Mind could be.
These guys could be Cartesians. Who knows?
Yeah.
There's a lot of. I mean, you can't get around the fact that Adele is not a trained archaeologist. She's a journalist, and she is really not there to do archaeology. She's there to do some, not just grave robbing, but corpse stealing. Essentially, is what she's doing. She's done. She's there. She's a body snatcher. Essentially, she's there to get the mummy and run. Which
even then, her apartment is full of artifacts. But I mean, that was par for the course back then too. Unfortunately,
absolutely. Lots of illicit antiquities from all over the place.
One of my favorite jokes was when all the mummies at the end, when they were done saving her sister and they were going to go out and take a look around Paris, and they walked out and they looked at the courtyard where the Louvre was going to be built later, but it's not built yet, and they're like, "It's a lovely area. We should put a pyramid right here." I thought that was really cute.
Yeah, it's a nice one.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. I liked it.
It's fun. Once you kind of dial into the kind of style, the kind of the kind of filmmaking way, it's a kind of adventurous romp.
Yep.
and it's it's well acted. There's Adèle Blanc-Sec is great in it. She's really kind of kick-ass, and she's a very charismatic lead figure. And you sort of start to care about her sister with the hat pin through her head, and Andre with a J for Jaguar, and his attempts to woo Adele, and all this, and the kind of professor who gets mortally wounded by the stupid big game hunter. Yeah, there's lots of interesting characters.
I was really sad when the pterosaur died, though. I didn't think that was needed.
Yeah.
But I liked how at the end, again, Adele didn't end up, it wasn't a love story about her because she was never interested in it, right? So again, like this, we've seen this with a couple movies where they didn't force it, right? And that wasn't her prize at the end or his prize at the end. And
Absolutely.
He's still going to find love, but he's going to find love with someone who doesn't have to change her personality to be there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Adele is free to carry on doing what she wants to do, which is have adventures and see the world and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It also passes the Bechdel test because she talks to her sister about tennis for a minute.
She also talks to her housekeeper about her sister.
Right,
Yeah.
yes, that too.
So how's everybody's French? Because there's a few jokes that I had to go back and check a couple of translations to get, and then a few things that kind of didn't make a lot of sense until I worked out the original language. Did you guys get any of those?
No, I don't speak French at all.
No.
So you already mentioned Andre with a J. That's what he tells Adele his name is when he's getting her to sign his book. J like a jaguar, and then she says, "Oh, I always dreamed of having one of those." And then he looks confused, and she says, "A jaguar." I'm like, "That's weird. Why would you dream of having a jaguar?" It's because he doesn't say jaguar in French. He says garden, jardin. And you can see that's what she's written in the book. She writes the book to Andre with a J like garden, jardin. So it changes it a little bit when she says, I always dreamed of having a garden versus I always dreamed of having a jaguar.
Yeah.
But I mean, that would fit. I mean,
I didn't question the jaguar thing, though.
No. I could totally see her with a pet jaguar.
Also, when the inspector's talking to the paleontologist and he says, "I'm strictly a Cretaceous man. I'd suggest you see a specialist in the Jurassic." The inspector says, "Look, I only have 24 hours to solve this. I can't go visiting Jura."
Yeah.
Which is,
I heard that. And
I guess mountains in France.
Which is what the Jurassic is named after. So the rocks from the Jura Mountains are kind of the type locality for the Jurassic.
Mm-hmm.
And the inspector is a little bumbling, so he's always mispronouncing words. So I felt like that was a very clever joke. And then so the professor says, "Let me find you a specialist in Paris in that case." Another one that flew by real quick because French is spoken so fast. After Adele is arrested and she's being booked, and the guy at the desk is asking her name, and he says, Adele, there's 2 L's in Adele. And she says, "I wish, but I only have 2 legs." Did you guys catch that one?
No. How? I still
That's
don't get
because
it.
the word for wings in French sounds a lot like the letter L. 2 L, 2 L's, or 2 wings. So he says 2 L's in Adele, but she hears 2 wings in Adele, and she says, "I wish, but I only have 2 legs."
Okay.
Very good.
I enjoyed too that she the costumes that she had all the time, like when she was dressing up as things, but also just that she was still in like the attire that a woman of her stature would have been wearing at that time, even while robbing the tomb and everything.
Apart from when she's having a bath, which was essential to the plot.
Yes. Yeah, to see her legs.
Oh, I'm just trying to decipher my scribbled notes. A couple of things that were weird as well, not really commented on, is that the treasure that they find with Patmos's mummy seems to be cursed because one of the hired laborers puts on a necklace which turns into a snake and tries to strangle him. But that's never really kind of explained further, I guess. Yeah. The pterodactyl pterosaur. The reconstruction is pretty good. I mean, quite well in a few of the films we've watched. The pterosaurs have kind of bat wings where the wings itself are supported by multiple fingers, like a bat does. But in pterosaurs, it's just the wing is formed by just one finger, just I think it's the pinky finger, and that's where the membrane kind of joins to, and then it has the rest of its fingers just on the wing. And they managed to do that correctly, which is nice. Some attention to detail there. But I also liked how all the way through the film, all these kind of crazy, insane things that are happening, like escaped pterosaurs and mummies coming back to life. Whenever it cuts to the president, he's always just blaming it on anarchists. Like this whole kind of this kind of French paranoia about anarchists and their plotting to damage the Republic. I thought that was quite funny.
Here's a random little thing not related to archaeology or paleontology, but there's a scene again with the police where they have the witness guy blowing into a breathalyzer, or maybe it was one of the police officers. They have someone blowing into a breathalyzer, which is this big thing full of these glass tubes with this colored liquid in it, and he's blowing into it, and it's sort of bubbling through this liquid. That got me wondering when the breathalyzer was invented, because this movie takes place in 1912. And the breathalyzer wasn't invented until, well, the breathalyzer as we know it today was invented in like the 1950s, I think, but the earliest version was called a drunkometer, or a drunkometer. And
why did we change
it was invented
the name?
in the
Can you please blow into the drunkometer, sir?
It was invented in the 1920s or 30s, and it looked more or less like they show. It had a bunch of like glass tubes with this colored liquid, and instead of blowing into it, you would blow into a balloon, and then you would plug the balloon into the machine, and then the air would bubble through the liquid, and depending on how much alcohol is in it, it would change color. So you'd have to sort of subjectively gauge how drunk somebody was based on how purple the liquid turned, which is basically what it looks like the thing is doing. So it looks like probably a real early version of the breathalyzer, but just like 20 years too early.
Yeah, it looks similar to what the old pregnancy tests used to look like too. Like, can you imagine if you had to check you were pregnant, you had to do like a whole little chemistry set in your bathroom, little test tubes and measuring things out. And
we should talk about how the ancient Egyptians are portrayed as being super advanced with better medicine than we had in 1912 and nuclear physicists and stuff like that. It's really interesting because they did that without invoking ancient aliens, and it's nice for a change to present ancient peoples as like completely capable and not primitive in any way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this month, Graham Hancock's new show just came out. Have you guys been following the discussions about that online?
a little bit, I
bit.
just find it all so annoying.
It's very annoying.
There's a great Guardian article that I read about it. I don't know if you guys have read that as well. I can send it to you afterwards. But it's written by, I think, by an archaeologist. But it has a fantastic closing line, which I won't spoil for you just now. But it does kind of eviscerate the whole premise.
It's just one of these shows that are so annoying because you know you're going to have to explain it to your friends and family because they're going to ask you about it, and they're going to ask you in this like way because they want you to be like, yeah, that's so cool, I agree. You're going to be like, oh no, Debbie Downer again.
So should we summarize Graham Hancock's position so in case anybody listening doesn't know what we're talking about?
But I mean, he's not even an original crank. I mean, this stuff kind of goes back to Velikovsky, von Daniken. There's a long and undistinguished lineage of kind of faux archaeologists who want to claim that there's some kind of agenda, some kind of hidden archaeology that the real story is being hidden from the people by gatekeeping archaeologists, which, if you've ever met an actual archaeologist, I mean, these people can't keep a secret after half a pint.
No, and all we want to do is talk about archaeology and what we found.
Yeah, the problem's not getting them to keep secrets; it's getting them to shut up after they've started on their subject.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those things where somebody with no kind of filter for no kind of understanding of what is reasonable evidence takes all the kind of cool stuff and then makes up their own kind of history by weaving through all the interesting, what they think are the interesting bits, and making a kind of fairy tale story about it. So with Hancock, it's the idea that there was a super advanced civilization that lived at the end of the Ice Age, and they were kind of not destroyed, but kind of fragmented by a global flood. So I mean, it's just kind of rehashed biblical literalism, just with less of a kind of religious angle to it. And so
all of this stuff gets so boring because we've like heard this all before, over and over and over. It's just repackaged
and
each time.
It has no explanatory power. It has no kind of evidence for it, unless you kind of you kind of cherry pick one bit and then ignore the thousands of other bits that are against it.
Mm-hmm. And then they never are very clear as to why we're gatekeeping and what we're trying to like, what's behind the gate, or what's the what is it that we're trying to keep, and like in what way are we, if archaeologists or scientists are keeping this secret, how do we
why are we so bad at it that Graham Hancock of all people knows?
Yes, that too. And where's our profit, right? Like, you always have to follow the money, and it's not in archaeology.
No, it might be in Netflix films, certainly, but it's not in archaeology.
Yeah.
So I assume you haven't actually watched any of his new series?
I don't want to, because it just gets the clicks up on it.
It just gives him the numbers.
Yeah. I don't want to either, but I watched the first episode with my class, since I do a class on archaeology and popular culture. It's kind of the thing that I have to talk about, especially when it's so current.
Yes.
But the way he's talking in the first episode, it's not so much like he thinks we're hiding something, but he thinks we're stupid and arrogant and we just can't figure it out somehow. It's like we won't listen to him because we think we're so good that we don't have to listen to him.
Right.
So I guess that's a better argument than we're hiding something and we're so good at being like keeping this conspiracy under wraps that we are all keeping the secret.
Yeah.
It's just that we're stupid, but we're too arrogant to admit that somebody who's not an archaeologist could have figured it out, which...
He's too smart to make it through peer review when we're too dumb to not. Right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I like the idea that the ancient Egyptians are very advanced in this movie, and like, giving them credit for it.
And they're also really snooty about the French as well, which is quite nice. They're kind of very condescending about about Belle Époque France, which was also nice as well.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, knowing that, especially since it seems like the movie was probably pretty much based on the first issue of the comic book. At least the pterodactyl is present on the cover of the first issue. So knowing that was written in the 1970s, right around the time Eric von Daniken is writing his stuff. So understanding that this idea of advanced technology in ancient Egypt is probably coming from these pseudo-archaeologists, it makes it complicated for me, understanding, it's nice to see that we're attributing advanced civilization to ancient people, but at the same time, tying that up with these ideologies that are damaging to archaeology, because it's pitting like journalists against archaeologists and saying journalists can do the work better than real archaeologists can. And Adele is a journalist in the movie as well, right? And she's seems to be allowed to just do the archaeology herself.
Yeah.
Even though she is very bad at it, because first of all, she determines the wrong person was the doctor.
Yes.
And then also doesn't know that the actual doctor has already been excavated and is in her home city.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also destroys everything except for the mummy.
Yeah.
Including the priceless mummy wrapping machine, which looks like it's one of a kind.
Yep.
I thought it was interesting as well in terms of whether it's anachronistic or not, is that when the professor is kind of charged with I mean, I don't know how he becomes the fall guy, but he gets charged because the pterosaur knocked the ex-mayor and his girlfriend into the river and they died.
Was
and
never
he
very
immediately
clear.
he immediately gets sent to jail and he's going to be executed pretty soon after. But he's going to be executed by guillotine, which obviously is a French invention. But it was used on prisoners until the 1970s. So that's not
Crazy.
unrealistic. That the guillotine wasn't just during the kind of revolutionary times, but was used up until I think 1977 is when the last condemned prisoner was executed by guillotine in France.
Although I guess it could be argued that the guillotine, as long as it's sharp enough, is more humane than the axe or hanging because it's more...
Or the electric chair, or
the electric chair, or the poison, or whatever they do, because it's the quickest, right, and the most reliable.
But it has to be sharp. I mean, there are stories of
super sharp,
when there was, during the terror and times like that, people would fight to be first in line to to
you don't want it dull in. Yeah.
No.
Humans are brutal.
Especially when we're trying to make things better. I mean, that's when the worst comes out. But yeah, I thought it was fun. Overall, it's one of those kind of films that if you were to kind of catch it on TV, you'd probably sit down and kind of whatever point in the film it was, you get sucked in. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I didn't think it would be good. Like, I kind of wish I'd watched it when I was younger, and I'll wait for my niece to get old enough, and we'll watch it. It's a fun movie with a strong female lead, and not in an annoying way. Like, she's not a sex pot, or she doesn't like stumble into things or need help with things or whatever.
Yeah.
She's
capable. She's very capable.
Yeah. And it's funny. I enjoyed it. I thought the for 2010 too, the I guess it would be CGI of the mummy and the pterosaurs was pretty good. Like, even like you get up close to the mummy's face as he's talking, and he has like the lip creases, and I thought it was pretty good. And the way that they walked wasn't like, because when you watch animation back in the day, walking is hard still is for animation, right? For CGI. And the way that they walk, they had them just walk, I don't know, kind of in the way that you'd expect a skeleton to walk.
Like quite stiff-legged, because they're kind of bone mostly. But it was quite nice actually having mummies that were sympathetic and not scary. I mean, they were kind of jokers, like Patmosis. On the way to the museum, he's quite happy to kind of scare some Parisians just because he's a bit of a joker.
Yeah. Well, and he scares, it's that guy again, that one.
It's the same guy from the beginning, the one that
gets scared, that
saw the pterosaur.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looked like they were kind of setting up a sequel, and if there are other comics, I wonder why that never happened. If it was, I mean, even sort of direct to streaming or something, I think I would watch it if they did another one.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I wonder if it just didn't make enough money or what.
I suppose a French movie is never going to make as much money as an English movie.
Yeah, even with kind of Luc Besson behind it.
I would hate to see this made in a Hollywood way. Like, if Hollywood gets a hold of it, all of a sudden she's a sexy and...
Yeah.
So, what are our final thoughts? How does this compare to Encino Man?
Well, I mean, Encino Man they're completely different. Encino Man, you sit with popcorn on a Friday night and watch it with your friends. This one you watch on an afternoon when you have nothing to do and you just feel like watching a movie. And I don't know why those are two different things to me, but those are two very different things.
It's one of the better films that we've watched. Definitely in the kind of top 25% perhaps of the films. And because it kind of knows what it's doing, it's just trying to have fun. It's not trying to make any serious points. It's not trying to, it's not trying to do more than it can. And Luc Besson's a good director. The Element's a great film as well. He knows how to kind of mix things up a bit and balance the kind of whimsy with the adventure and the action and the kind of sort of slight love interest, but kind of move it in interesting directions. So it makes it overall a pretty fun watch.
Yeah, it's one of the rare movies that we've watched that I would watch again happily.
If you've been enjoying Screens of the Stone Age, get in touch with us. Follow us on Twitter at SOTSA_podcast and on Facebook at SOTSA podcast, or send us an email to screensofthestoneage@gmail.com. Screens of the Stone Age is supported by the Paleoanthropological Society of Canada. Find out more at pasc-scpa.ca.